got their attention yet, so.
They said 1 minute.
Okay. Good morning. If we could quiet down, please, and start the program. Thank you. Thank you. I'm Catherine Eagles, Chair of Council here, and so from Wesley to all of you, a very big welcome. A welcome particularly for those from Cedar Hill United and St. Luke's United and possibly from Trillium United. So, a couple of quick comments. The washrooms are to my right down the hall. There's a men's and a women's. And secondly, at the end of the service, please remain in your seats. We are going to be bringing tables into the middle, and that's where the food will be. So if you could stay seated, it will help us get those tables in place. And finally, to our presenters, I would very much like to say, and forgive my pronunciation, but Ani, and bend again. Was that close? Beamed again. We are very pleased that you're here. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Kathy, for welcoming us all here today, and it's good to be together here in this space. My name's Michael, and I'm the minister here at Wesley, and it's also Reverend Thomas is here from St. Luke's, and so all of us will be leading together and participating in this very beautiful, unique service. And we trust that all of creation is making their way here to be with us in this moment. And so I just invite you to, let's just take a couple deep breaths in together. Find your way to this room. Know that below this floor is the sacred earth that sustains us and holds us. And feel the air coming in through your nose. And trust that the Spirit is that close to each and every one of us. And we trust that we will be moved as we gather here today. And I also want to extend a very deep and special welcome to our 6 guests here today. And I just have a small tobacco bundle to present to each of you. And it's my pleasure to invite Shelley forward to offer our great Thanksgiving.
Sego Sewagwego, Shelley Niyungets, Gayakono, Dewistaway Clan. My English name is Shelley. I'm Cayuga from 6 Nations in the Grand River Territory. My clan is Snipe Clan, and I'd just like to offer the Thanksgiving address this morning to get us started. It's the words that come before all else. So today we have gathered, and where we look upon the faces around us, we see that the cycles of life continue. We have been given the duty to live in balance and harmony with each other and with all living things. So now let us bring our minds together as one as we give greetings and thanks to each other as people. Now our minds are one. We are thankful to our Mother, the Earth, for she gives us everything that we need for life. She supports our feet as we walk upon her. It gives us joy that she still continues to care for us, as she has from the beginning of time. To our mother, we send thanksgiving, love, and respect, and now our minds are one. We give thanks to all the waters of the world for quenching our thirst, for providing strength, and for nurturing all of our beings. We know its power in many forms: waterfalls, rain, mists and streams, rivers and oceans, snow and ice. We are grateful that the waters are still here and meeting their responsibility for the rest of creation. Can we agree that water is important in our lives and bring our minds together as one to send greetings and thanks to the water? Now our minds are one. Standing around us, we see all the trees. The earth has many families of trees who each have their own instructions and roles. Some provide shelter and shade, others bear fruit and beauty and have many useful gifts. The maple is the leader of our trees. To recognize its gift of sugar, maple sap, when the people need it the most. Many peoples of the world recognize a tree as a symbol of peace and strength. With one mind, we greet and give thanks to the tree of life. Now our minds are one. We gather our minds to greet and thank the enlightened teachers who have come to help throughout the ages. When we forget how to live in harmony, they remind us of the way we were instructed to live as people. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to these caring teachers. Now our minds are one. We now turn our thoughts to the Creator, our Great Spirit, and send greetings and thanks for all the gifts of creation. Everything we need to live a good life is here on Mother Earth. For all the love that is still around us, we gather our minds together as one and send our choicest words of greeting and thanks to the Creator. Now our minds are one. Nawa.
We light our candles of acknowledgement. We light this candle in the name of Jesus, who calls us into a wild and holy way of living and believing, a faith that asks questions, takes risks, and grows through love. As we gather, we acknowledge the land beneath our feet, land cared for and cherished by generations by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Adowadaran peoples. We light this candle on holy ground, committing ourselves to deeper listening, truth-telling, and repair. We light this candle as a sign of our commitment to radical belonging, to honor the sacred worth of every body, every story, every becoming. In this wild and holy love, all are welcome and all are made whole.
It's my pleasure to introduce Kelly Lorla. Some of you may recognize and know Kelly from her work with Mino Ode Koiwak Nagamawak, which translates the Good-Hearted Women Singers. I know that the drumming group I just mentioned has participated in events in this building and also in the community. She's lived 27 years of lived, and she has 27 years of lived in Anishinaabe knowledge and experiences. She's a social worker, an academic scholar, and lecturer at universities in Waterloo Region, and we're so happy to have her here today in the role of singer and drummer. Kelly's an advocate for social policy change pertaining to Indigenous child welfare and policing practices impacting Indigenous peoples, and of reconciliation initiatives. So thank you for being here today with us, Kelly, and for sharing some of your knowledge and your wisdom.
Thank you, Anne. And I want to acknowledge, too, that I'm here because of Anne, maybe because of you, too, but also because, you know, there's been a relationship started from a number of years ago where Anne was coming to that drum circle and community. And to me, truth and reconciliation is the work that I do. And I feel that the only way it can happen is through relationships. You know, when I was reflecting on coming here today, and I know I have just a few minutes, but 2015, the final report of the Truth and Reconciliation came out. We're 11 years later. So now the question to me is about what have we done? You know, I'm an Indigenous Sami settler individual, and I feel like it's my settler obligation, responsibility to look at how do I do my social work on the lands where I live. I work in a federal prison. I see 52% of the incarcerated individuals are Indigenous. And we sing every week in drum circles along with the social work, mental health stuff, but there's something wrong with the system when we see that great overrepresentation. The same as in the child welfare system. There's too many Indigenous children there. So in my work, I'm always talking and asking questions about what ideology, how are our policies informed by colonialism, patriarchy, and that forms our society here, that creates sort of even policies that discriminate against Indigenous people, people of color. You know, I followed faithfully Honorable Murray Sinclair throughout all of his work with the Truth and Reconciliation. It is sad that he passed on to the spirit world in November 4th, 2024, but something that he always said it to Indigenous people, but settler people too, that I've taken to heart, and he says, know who you are and where you come from, because that will tell you why you're here and where you are going. For settler peoples, you know, it's reconciliation has to begin with truth work. The truth work of our own settler identity. Where did we come from? I heard the land acknowledgement acknowledged just earlier. You know, and to me that is, if we look at another layer of that, we're making that acknowledgement because Indigenous peoples have only 0.2%. 0.2% of the land in Canada. When this was originally their lands, so 99.8% of the land is in settler and government hands and ownership. So there is no question in my mind that truth and reconciliation has to be there. How do I live on this land to create right relations with Indigenous peoples and for justice? In 2021, maybe you know this, but Bill C-15 came out, and that was to acknowledge the rights of Indigenous peoples, and it came through the United Nations. Canada was slow to acknowledge and even accept that Indigenous peoples should have their own rights. They, for 3 years, from 2007 to 2010, they did not acknowledge. When in 1948, the rights of all human beings were acknowledged, somehow it was so late coming for Indigenous peoples to have rights. And so I guess it's another cause for the truth and reconciliation work that we do. And how are we, as settler peoples, obstacles? How are we ourselves getting in the way of the work that we do? So I respect the right of self-determination, free, prior, informed consent, and the duty to consult. I can't do anything without talking to the Indigenous people that I'm supporting, for example, in the prison system. There is a song that I would like to sing, and this song came to our community drum circle. It's called the Prophecy Song. It came through Anishinaabe elder Jake Pine. You know, it was about the coming into the eighth fire, and about Indigenous and settler peoples making a choice about, are we going on this road together with one another? It means us having to change some things so that we see ourselves as belonging in the same world. You know, our creation stories, all faith people have a creation story, and they guide us about how to be in right relations with all our relations. So this song is saying, come in before we forget our teachings about how to be those good human beings. This song also has teachings for Anishinaabe people too, but today I would like to raise it about Indigenous and settler peoples coming together. And we can only do that by coming together and building those ethical relations. So I wonder if some of the choir members, I do have some drums and shakers up here if you wanted to come. There will be a portion of the song that is, I'll sing the first round or push up on my own, and then when you hear that steady beat, you can join in with the steady beat of that heartbeat of the drum if you wanted to come up. If it was, I mean, it can't be quite a circle, but maybe a slight horseshoe. And then we're all kind of in here together. So I'm just going to start with this first round that's a quicker beat, but when we go to a heartbeat, it's just a steady one.
Thank you, Kelly and Al, for being here today, and thank you for the song and for inspiring us again towards reconciliation as a community. And it is now my honor to welcome our friends from Nations Uniting. Nations Uniting is a United Church of Canada Mission and Service Fund supported organization on 6 nations with a goal of working with survivors of residential school and also for working with settlers and newcomers on learning our own responsibilities with the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action to the church and more broadly. And Rhonda Johns is here, and Rhonda is the program coordinator for Nations Uniting. And I've had the privilege of actually knowing Rhonda for about 10 years. Rhonda served on the board of directors at Five Oaks Center, where I served as executive director for 2 extended terms, 3 terms. The 3rd term I got on my knees and begged her to stay, and she did. And with her today is Misty and Shelley and Jesse, and we're so delighted that you're also here this morning to walk with us through the blanket exercise, which was developed by Kairos, which is a joint ecumenical initiative which the United Church of Canada is connected to. So, come on up, my friends.
Welcome everybody. Like Michael said, I'm Rhonda from Nations Uniting. We've been in Michigan for 14 years doing healing programs, which I had done with the survivors. We've done Grandmother's Tea, we've done women's circles, we've done Cedar soaps, we've done a lot of education, showing films, talking films, stuff like that. Recently, we had approval to do the residential school film screening documentary that we partnered with Grand River United Church on 6 nations, and we're going to be doing that on a monthly basis with the survivors. We're doing mushroom tours with the survivors, and that's working out quite well with our surrounding area churches. So I'd like to take the opportunity to invite my new colleagues, Jesse, who will be our narrator within the blanket exercise, and Misty Ladd and Shelley will be helping our new Indian agent, Michael, folding up the lands as we go along. So we'll get Jess to start first.
Well, good morning, everybody. First off, I'd like to thank you for having us out here, particularly me. I don't get out too much these days, but it's so nice to see everyone, and it's a beautiful Sunday. It's also Solidarity Day for us Indigenous people, so this exercise really means a lot. And if you're feeling a little passionate, you know you're feeling a little hot and heated, it's also summer solstice. So while we're getting ready to transition into better things, I'd just like to welcome you all. This exercise will take probably about 45 minutes at least. But trust me, we will get through it together. We got Michael here being the Indian agent, and it's going to be very interesting. But yeah, I guess we'll get started. So first off, these blankets represent the northern part of Turtle Island, or what we know as Canada, before the arrival of the Europeans. So you guys who are going to be participating on these blankets, you are representing the Indigenous peoples and the people that have been here for at least 10,000 years. Long before the arrival of the Europeans, Turtle Island was your home, and home to millions of people like you. You lived in hundreds of nations. You shed and hunted and farmed. Each community had its own language, culture, traditions, laws, and governments. As communities, you often worked together and cooperated with one another. However, like all people, you sometimes experience conflict amongst yourselves. Before the newcomers arrived, one of the ways in which the original peoples ended disputes was by making treaties. The land is very important to you. All of your needs, food, clothing, shelter, culture, your spirituality, are taken care of by the land, which is represented here by the blankets. And in return, you take very seriously your responsibility to care for the land.
Now, if we can get who's capable of walking, I bring you all together to walk among the blankets now, please. By stepping into the blankets, you take the role of First Nation people, Inuit, and later Métis people. You are living on it, and once you're onto the blankets, you must not step off the blankets. So wander around, just wander among the blankets. There's a blanket empty up here. So when I say stop, this is where you had settled among the land. Stop. This is where you've settled on the lands. We're handing out scrolls, and when I yell scroll 1 to 22, I want you to speak very loudly, or you'll have to come up here and use one of the mics in order to read your scrolls. Thank you. So scroll 1, please come up and read your scroll.
One of my favorite things about my culture is how we're taught that everything on the earth is to be respected. It's an important part of the culture and covers everything. That includes respecting yourself. Respecting yourself is one of the most important things my culture has taught me. Also, the land, water, plants, air, and animals are all very important to our culture and need to be respected. Without any of it, what would we be?
And if I can have you go back to the spot where you were. Thank you. Narrator.
So, things were happening in Europe at the end of the 15th century that would mean a huge change for you. European explorers had just, quote unquote, discovered you and your lands. This started a fierce competition between European nations.
Without even consulting you, we made deals amongst ourselves and divided up control over you and your lands. Usually, whichever nation discovered your land first took control with the blessing of the Christian Church. This practice is now called the doctrine of discovery.
And so began the so-called European discovery of Turtle Island.
Scroll 2, please come up.
At contact with Europeans, each of the hundreds of indigenous peoples of indigenous America possessed all the elements of nationhood that were well established by European settlers: territory, governing structures, legal systems, and a historical continuity with our territories. Nothing since the arrival of Columbus has occurred to merit any reduction in the international legal status of indigenous peoples. The recognition of indigenous nations and our rights pose no threat to non-indigenous peoples.
So when the Europeans first arrived on Turtle Island, there were many more indigenous people than Europeans. The newcomers depended on you for their survival, and you helped them to understand how you did things, how you taught your children, how you took care of people who were sick, how you lived on the land in a way that was enough for future generations, and how your governments worked. In the beginning, there was lots of cooperation and support between you and the settlers. The settlers and their leaders recognized you, the First Peoples, as having your own governments, laws, and territories. They recognized you as independent nations, as having your own governments, laws, and They made agreements or treaties with you. These treaties explained how you were going to share the land, the water, the animals, and the plants. These treaties were very important because they were agreements between you and the kings and the queens of countries in Europe. They made these agreements with you because they were here first. The land belonged to you, and you had your own governments. The treaties officially recognized your power and independence as nations. The Europeans understood they could not force their laws or way of life on the people who were here long before they ever arrived. They understood that you had rights.
In the Royal Proclamation of 1763, King George III said Indigenous nations own their lands. The king said that the only legal way for newcomers to gain control of those lands was by making treaties between the two nations. The year 2013 marks the 250th anniversary of that Royal Proclamation.
Later on, the Government of Canada was formed, and the Royal Proclamation became part of Canadian law. For you, the Indigenous peoples, the treaties were very special and sacred agreements. They were statements of peace, friendship, and sharing, and they were based on respect and honesty. Sharing was very important to you. The hunters shared their food with everyone, and the families helped one another raise children. In the treaties, you tried to help the Europeans understand what you meant by sharing. And just a reminder for participants that they must not step off the blankets. The goal is to stay on the blankets, even as they get smaller. I also want to remind everyone that Indigenous peoples have always resisted when somebody tried to take the land away. But the Europeans didn't see it that way anymore. They now had a different view of the treaties. For them, land was something that could be bought and sold, and treaties were a way of getting you, the Indigenous peoples, to give up your land. May I call scroll 3 on up here?
Where common memory is lacking, where people do not share in the same past, there can be no real community. Where community is to be formed, common memory must be created.
After a while, you didn't get along very well with the Europeans. And when the War of 1812 ended, the Europeans no longer needed you to help them with the fighting. As the fur trade dried up, the European newcomers turned more and more to farming and started looking for more land. And before too long, there were more Europeans than Indigenous peoples. One reason for this was the diseases the Europeans brought with them, diseases such as smallpox, measles, and tuberculosis. Now you, the Indigenous peoples, suffered badly from these diseases because you have never had them in your communities before. Millions of you died. In fact, there are some people who believe that half the Indigenous people alive at the time died from these diseases. In some communities, 9 out of 10 people died.
The European will be walking around with the smallpox blanket where you were infected.
Blankets infected with deadly smallpox virus were given or traded to Indigenous people by military leaders such as Lord Jeffrey Amherst. You represent the many Indigenous people who died from smallpox after having come into contact with such blanket. To the person I gave the blanket, please step off.
Now, you people stepping off your blankets with the white index card are representing the people who we lost to these diseases back in the day.
So everyone with a white index card, step off the blanket.
No, step off the blanket and go sit down.
And sit down.
Yeah, you can return to your seat.
You died, sorry.
You died?
You died.
If we could please take a moment of silence to remember those who died from diseases. In a moment, I'm going to walk up to one of you who is standing in the east. You represent the Botuk, one of the original people of what is now the island of Newfoundland. You also died from diseases you had never seen before. Because the Europeans overhunted, some of you starved. Some of you died in violent encounters with the settlers trying to take your lands. Some of you were hunted down and killed. In 1829, the last person recognized by the Europeans as your people, Shanaditi, died in St. John's. Your language and culture became extinct.
Now the European will walk to the south and choose two people that are standing close together. Don't ask me the direction.
You represent the First Nations that were divided when the border between you and the United States, when the United States and British Columbia were created. This border divides communities and cuts you off from each other. Please move to separate blankets.
In a moment, I'm going to move to the west. Construction of the railway opened up the prairies to settlers. Land was needed for farming, and the government of Canada bought a huge piece of land from the Hudson's Bay Company. This was very hard for some of you who were already living there, such as the Métis, the Cree, and the Blackfoot. You, the Métis, fought for your land during the Red River Rebellion and the Northwest Resistance. You won some of these battles, but in the end, you were defeated by the government soldiers. You represent the Métis leaders who died in battle, were put in jail, or were executed. I'm going to come now to the west.
After these rebellions, the Métis people entered a period of dispersion. Fearing for their lives, Métis people changed their names. And in all directions, some moved into the United States, while others went back to their First Nations families and became treaty Indians. Others denied their native heritage altogether. These were dark times for the Métis, a time of persecution and extreme poverty due to their landlessness and general lack of education. And the high Arctic Inuit communities were moved to isolated, unfamiliar, and barren lands, often with very bad results. One of these results was tuberculosis epidemics, which reached northern communities in the 1950s. By 1956, 1/7 of the entire Inuit population was being treated for tuberculosis, while 1/3 of the population overall was affected. Many children were removed from their homes to be sent down south for treatment in tuberculosis sanatoriums, and some were never to return. A large number of infected individuals passed away from the disease. Currently, the rate for tuberculosis among the Inuit is 185 times higher than for Canadian-born non-Aboriginal people.
You represent people like the Inuit and the Innu at Davis Inlet, along with many other Indigenous communities who suffered and sometimes died because you were forced to move to an unfamiliar place. Please move your blanket away from others and fold it and stand on it. And that's those with the blue cards, right? Oh, you did that already. Okay, great.
Those with blue cards, step off the blankets. You represent those who died of hunger after being forced off your original land and away from your hunting grounds. As Indigenous peoples, you lost more than just your land. Because the land is so important to you, when it's taken away, some of you also lost your way of living, your culture, and in some cases, your reason to live. Now, could we call on scroll number 4 to come on up?
The idea of terra nullius, which in Latin means empty land, meant European countries could send out explorers, and when they found land, they could claim it for their nation. These were often lands we were using.
The land wasn't empty, and we as Europeans knew it. So we changed the idea to include lands not being used by civilized peoples, or lands not being put to civilized use. It was us who decided what it meant to be civilized, and we decided that because you and your people were not using the land in a civilized way, that we could take it, and it was almost impossible to stop us.
Scroll 5.
The BNA Act, also known as the Constitution Act in 1867, put Indians and lands reserved for Indians under the control of the federal government. When this happened, we lost our rights and control over our lands.
This law gave control of your lands to the government of Canada, which at the time was made up of only people from Europe. Now you, the Indigenous peoples, were not allowed in the creation of this law that would have such a big impact on your lives. More and more, the plan was to try and make you all like the Europeans.
Scroll 6.
The Indian Act. In 1876, all the laws dealing with us were gathered together and put into the Indian Act. The Indian Act completely changed our lives. As long as our cultures were strong, it was difficult for the government to take our lands. So the government used the Indian Act to attack who we were as peoples. Hunting and fishing were now limited, and our spiritual ceremonies like the potlatch, powwow, and Sundance were now against the law. This didn't change until the 1950s.
Now hear this. According to the Indian Act of 1876 and the British North American Act of 1867, you and all of your territories are now under the direct control of the Canadian federal government. You will be placed on reserves. Please fold your blankets until they are just large enough to stand on.
You went from being strong, independent First Nations with your own governments to isolated and poor bands that depended on the government for almost everything. You're treated like you knew nothing and like you couldn't run your own lives. You became the responsibility of the federal government. Through the Indian Act, the federal government continues to this day to deny you your basic rights. These rights are things that most Canadians take for granted, such as healthy schools, proper housing, and clean running water.
Also, you may not leave your reserve without a permit. You may not vote. You may not get together to talk about your rights. You may not practice your spirituality or your traditional forms of government. If you do any of these things, you will be put in jail.
Scroll 7.
I know what the government did in the past. They said where we had to live. I know that we're not treated equally now because I can feel it. We're all Canadians and we should all be treated equally.
The Indian Act also tried to stop Indigenous peoples from fighting to keep their land. For example, under the Indian Act, it was against the law to raise money to fight for land rights in the courts until the 1950s.
Scroll 8.
Under this federal government policy, all First Nations people who became doctors, teachers, lawyers, soldiers, or who went to university lost their legal Indian status. This was called being granted enfranchisement.
In other words, the government would no longer legally recognize you as a First Nations person. This cut you off from your communities, including First Nations soldiers. So including First Nations soldiers, returning from the First Nations lawyers who are not allowed to fight for the right of their people.
I'm now going to choose one person who does not have a yellow card, and I'm going to select you, Maureen, here at the front. Maureen, you were enfranchised. You're a First Nations teacher, lawyer, doctor, or veteran, so you've lost your Indian status and you have left your community.
Scroll 9.
The government thought the Indian problem would solve itself as more and more Indigenous people died from disease and others became part of the large Canadian society. As one government employee said, the government goal was to continue until there is not a single Indian in Canada that has not been absorbed into the body politic, and that there is no Indian problem and no Indian department.
So you guys had to become more like Europeans by giving up your rights, farming, going to school, and praying in church like them.
So now what the European Indian agent, I should say, has now taken a child to the residential school. Sorry, scroll 10.
From 1820 until the 1990s, the federal government took First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children from our homes and communities and put them in boarding schools that were run by the churches. As parents, we didn't have a choice about this. Sometimes the police arrived to take away our children. These schools were often very far from our homes, and they had to stay at them all or most of the year. Mostly, they were not allowed to speak our own languages, and they were punished if they did. Often, our children were not given enough food. The last Indian residential school closed in 1996.
So all the people with yellow cards, please raise your hands. You may now go with our European Indian agent, and we are going to take you to the residential schools. You represent those who were taken out of your communities and placed in these residential schools far away from your homes. Now, while some students say they had positive experiences at the school, most of you say that you suffered from very bad conditions and from different kinds of abuse. Many of you lost your family connections, didn't learn your language, culture, or traditions. Because you grew up in the schools and rarely went home, many of you never learned to be good parents. Some students died at the schools. Many of you never returned home or had trouble reintegrating when you did.
Would the person with the yellow index card marked with an X please step off the blanket? You represent one of the thousands of children who died at the residential schools and who later, as a result of your experience. Many of you were welcome back but had difficulty fitting in. Some of you experienced lateral violence when you returned. One person in the community, please turn your back on the person to represent the family ties that were damaged because of intergenerational impacts. Everyone else with a yellow index card, please find a spot nearby on the floor. You don't have to sit down. You represent those whose connection to your family and community was broken and you never made it home. Some of you ended up in urban centers, others ended up incarcerated due to your experience at residential school.
Please be silent for another moment to honor those who died and who never made it home because they lost connection to their family and community.
Scroll 11.
You have to remember that the Canadian government has done a lot to Aboriginal people that was meant to make us become like Europeans. For example, in residential schools, my grandmother told me you couldn't speak our language or you'd get beaten. You couldn't see your parents, things like that. We didn't have voting rights for a long time. We also lost a lot of our culture. Heather, a Cree youth from a community in Saskatchewan.
Thanks to the courage of survivors, Canadians started to find out about residential schools. Former students negotiated a settlement agreement that included the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. In 2008, the Prime Minister apologized for the residential schools. Here is an excerpt. To the approximately 80,000 living former students and all families and communities, the Government of Canada now recognizes that it was wrong to forcibly remove children from their homes, and we apologize for having done this. We now recognize that it was wrong to separate children from rich and vibrant cultures and traditions, and we apologize for having done this. Not only did you suffer these abuses as children, but as you became parents, you were powerless to protect your own children from suffering the same experience. And for this, we are sorry.
But apologizing means you have to change what you're doing. Many people are still waiting to see if Canada will change how it treats Indigenous children. The residential schools are not just part of our history. Children and grandchildren of people who went to these schools feel the impacts. Many former students are alive today, and some have had a chance to tell their story to Canadians through the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, but Indigenous children are still treated differently. Your schools don't get as much money. Today, you're even more likely to be taken from your communities, but this time, you are being placed in foster care.
Scroll 12.
From the 1960s to the 1980s, thousands of First Nations and Métis children were forced illegally from our homes and adopted or fostered, usually by non-Aboriginal people. This period is known as the 60s Scoop. Many of these kids experienced violence, racism, and abuse, and lost connection to their identity and culture. Like residential schools, the purpose of the 60s Scoop was assimilation.
In a moment, I'm going to come and select one of you, and you represent a child apprehended from your community during the 60s Scoop. You were not able to reintegrate into your extended family or territory, leaving you with a sense of loss.
Scroll 13.
Shannon Custis-Chin of Attawatska First Nation had a dream: safe and comfy schools for First Nations children and youth, and classes that respect First Nation cultures. She worked tirelessly to try to convince the federal government to give First Nations children a proper education and fair funding.
Scroll 14.
Shannon said, "I want to tell you what it is like to never have the chance to feel excited about being educated. It's hard to feel pride when our classrooms are cold and the mice run over our lunches, and when you don't have proper resources like libraries and science labs. You know that kids in other communities have proper school. So you begin to feel as if you are a child who doesn't count for anything. We want our younger brothers and sisters to go to school thinking that school is a time for hope and dreams of the future. Every kid deserves this."
Shannon passed away in a car accident when she was 15, but the movement she started lives on. It's called Shannon's Dream. So please unfold one corner of your blankets and give yourselves a round of applause for the young Indigenous leaders like Shannon who are bringing about positive change.
Scroll 15.
Over the years, more than 70% of the land set aside for us in the treaties has been lost or stolen, and big companies are allowed to make lots and lots of money from Indigenous lands and natural resources. We, the Indigenous peoples, get little but the pollution from any of the companies that don't respect the earth, and future generations are left to clean up the mess.
Scroll 16.
First Nations are nations. First Nations, treaty people, signed over 300 treaties with the Europeans during the 1700s and 1800s. The treaties agreed to share the lands and resources with the immigrants. Under existing legislation, treaty people are sovereign nations. The Indians surrendered over 9.9 million square kilometers of their land to the immigrants. Today, the sons of the immigrants have the largest treaty rights in Canada. The Indians have become the poorest people in Canada.
One way the Canadian government pressures Indigenous peoples to leave their lands and assimilate is by failing to provide enough funds for basic services. Over half the drinking water systems on reserve pose a significant risk to human health. That's from the Office of the Auditor General in 2011. There are 85,000 new housing units needed on reserve, and 60% of existing houses are in need of repair. Rates of suicide are high in some First Nations communities and are even higher in many Inuit communities. Among First Nation communities, suicide rates are twice the national average and show no signs of decreasing. Suicide rates among Inuit are even higher than among First Nations, at 6 to 11 times the Canadian average.
Scroll 17.
For many of us, women are the carriers of culture. By targeting women, you target the heart of the nation. Indigenous women have been targeted through federal legislation and policies that try to wear down our communities, and in so doing, make it easier to take our lands. Residential schools have left a legacy of violence that contributes directly to abuse, especially abuse directed at women and children. And in wider society, everyday racism causes wounds that are both visible and invisible. Statistics Canada 2009, Indigenous women are at least 3.5 times as likely to experience violence as non-Indigenous women in Canada. Over 1,000 Indigenous women have gone missing or have been murdered since the 1970s, and these are only the cases that have been documented. The real number is certainly much higher.
Gender inequality in the Indian Act means that Indigenous women who married non-Indigenous men lost their legal Indian status, but a non-Indigenous woman who married an Indigenous man gained status. Amendments have been made, but gender discrimination has not been fully removed from the Indian Act. In addition, if the father is not listed on the birth certificate, he is presumed by the Canadian government to be non-Indigenous.
In a moment, I'm going to approach one of you. You represent one of the women stripped of your status because of this gender inequality in the Indian Act. As a result, you have had to leave your community, and you'll be asked to sit down.
In 2007, a step was taken to improve the way Indigenous peoples are treated. The United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples became part of an international law. This is an agreement among the world's governments that is a minimum standard to make sure Indigenous peoples survive and thrive. Canada was one of the last countries to agree to the declaration. Now, we need to make sure it is put into action. Please unfold one small corner of your blankets to honor the people who wrote the declaration and worked to get it adopted, and give yourselves a round of applause. Despite the Government of Canada's centuries of efforts to take away your identity, as Indigenous peoples, you have continued to resist and to pass down your languages, ceremonies, and much more.
Scroll 18.
We have language immersion programs and healing initiatives based on our traditional values. Our elders are passing on land-based skills to our youth, and mothers and grandmothers are working to address violence in our nations by reinstating ceremonies that honor women. Our leaders are using the courts to have our rights recognized, and many of our nations are growing. We see treaties as living agreements that, if respected, will allow people from all backgrounds to share the land peacefully and respectfully. We are strong and resilient, having survived centuries of efforts to make us disappear.
Scroll 19.
To us, the answer is not about incremental change. It is not about just concrete action. It is also repairing the relationship. And the way to repair the relationship between us and Canada is to have this country acknowledge that its richness and its wealth come from their one-sided interpretation of the treaties. There has to be henceforth a double understanding of what those treaties represent.
Scroll 19.
Oh, 20, sorry. I'm slow.
Scroll 20. The role of culture within the reconciliation progress, I think, is that both Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal cultures alike must respect one another in light of their historical experiences. They have to see this eye to eye on healing, so to speak. By this, I mean that there needs to be maximized understanding and trust built between the cultures involved.
What was that, 20? That was 21? Okay, now we're on scroll 22, sorry. 21. Michael. I can't count this morning.
Despite direct assimilation attempts, despite the residential school systems, despite the strong influences of the church, the Métis communities to ignore and deny our Aboriginal heritage, despite not having a land base and despite our own diversity in heritage, we are still able to say we are proud to be Métis. We are resilient as a weed and beautiful as a wildflower. We have much to celebrate and be proud of. Christy Belcourt, Métis artist.
Scroll 22, this will be the last one.
Our leaders need to show the way, but no matter how many deals and agreements they make, it is in our daily conversations and interactions that our success as a nation in forging a better place will ultimately be measured. It is what we say to and about each other in public and in private that we need to look at changing.
The violence of colonization has left a lot of pain. All across Canada, the relationship between Indigenous people and newcomers is often broken. We don't need more broken promises. We need to repair the relationship, and to do this, we need real change.
Now, if everyone could just take a really quick look around and just realize how many blankets are actually left, how many people are actually standing on them, and how much of a small group that is left that is starting to rebuild our cultures today. And with all of the support of people like you and learning and coming together during things like this, We have an opportunity to share and raise up our cultures and allow the mistakes to heal so that everybody can thrive together on such a great country. This is a great land that we live on, and we all live here together. And it's not like we want to hold on to this any longer. We want to grow together with everybody. We don't want to be different or the same. We want to embrace each other. And that was the blanket exercise. Thank you so much.
Thank you for all, I'm going to move on here, it's shorter. Thank you all for participating. I hope you all enjoyed that and it was educational. So what we're going to do now, we know it's kind of heavy, but we want you to stay seated. And we're going to have Shelley come around and smudge the area for everyone to bring your minds back to one, if need be. So while we're waiting for the smudge to come around and smudge everyone, we now invite people who have stepped off the blankets to join us. And we already did that. So look around the room, we've already did that. I'm just reading my script. So now what we ask you is to hold the image in your minds, then ask the participants on the blankets, once they've seated, to share their feelings. And if you would like, we have a feather that you could hold. And while people are holding the feather, we ask you to respect them and listen to what they have to say. So the questions is, what did you experience? What did you feel? And focusing on your feelings, speak from the heart. So if everyone wants to take that. No one? No one wants to speak how they were feeling? Oh, if you'd like, could you come up here and then that way everyone can hear you?
I actually was feeling very anxious and afraid every time the ground started shrinking and our Indigenous land was getting smaller and smaller. And I felt sort of terrified and felt like hiding every time I saw the Indian agent coming around, because it seemed like there was never any good news. It was always going to be something bad for the Indigenous people.
Profound sadness and shame, because what I heard was that Canada seemed to be the last in every aspect to do anything about it. I'm starting to feel some hope and wondering how I'm going to change to see where I can help in the future.
Well, as an educator, it was depressing and distressing to see that the residential schools were not closed until 1996. In the schools, we try to get the kids to be open to diversity, open to being kind, and we really work hard at that. And it's very depressing to me to have seen this happening in our beautiful Canada. Hopefully, this will be encouraged to never, ever, ever, ever happen again.
Anyone else?
Hi. So one thing that I got from this, I'm educated. Like, I did a little bit of my own research about residential schools, but I didn't know what happened to the fullest extent. And I'm not an Indigenous person myself, but I feel like this had to be said. I speak for my people, like the Europeans, when I say that we truly are sorry, and in the future, we hope that we can reconcile with you guys and hope to coexist and hope to embrace each other to the fullest extent. So, we are sorry.
Upset when we still do this every time. Smarten up, she says. So this exercise was not to create guilt on anyone. We just wanted to educate and inform you of what had happened to us in our history. In modern days, action is to continue the history and how we need to work together and change attitudes and actions against one another. And hopefully we all can live in harmony in the past and in the near future. And Nations Uniting like to thank all my peoples to helping me out, and Michael for bringing this to you. And we were glad that we could do it for you. Nyawa.
I just want to acknowledge the gift that you have offered to all of us today, the gift of teaching and drumming and the story of sharing about the history of Indigenous people on Turtle Island. And it doesn't go unnoticed, the deep work that this takes from Indigenous people to retell the story over and over. And now we all have a responsibility to take what we have learned and to share this and to look within ourselves to determine how we might go forward. We each have gifts to share, many different ways that we can work in this world. We have gifts of our volunteerism, the gifts that we share food, the gifts of our treasure, the way we offer our financial gifts to one another, and there are some baskets to the side here, some labeled by Ryland, like over here, labeled for your churches. So if you do have an offering for your church, there's also an opportunity to make an offering to two Indigenous organizations, which will be split in two. One is Nations Uniting, and the other is the Southwest Ontario Aboriginal Health Access Centre here in Cambridge. So we trust that the Creator blesses all of these gifts. And I just want to acknowledge the gifts of the three men at the back who are here doing tech today. And I also recognize that some of them have to head out, and so we're grateful for what you've offered today. And I'm going to turn it over to Anne, who's going to share a little bit about the United Church's involvement.
Between 1925
and 1969, the United Church of Canada operated a total of 15 schools within the Indian residential school system as part of the federal government's policy of assimilating Indigenous peoples. A history of these United Church schools can be found at thechildrenremembered.ca. Students in those schools suffered physical, sexual, emotional, spiritual, and cultural abuse, for which they sued the government and churches. This resulted in the Indian Residential Schools Settlement Agreement, which included the creation of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. Its final report and calls to action make clear that there's still a very long journey ahead of us as we seek reconciliation. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission unveiled a history that is not simply about misguided and profoundly abusive attempts to assimilate Indigenous peoples. It also revealed a colonial legacy that continues to this day, making itself known in inequities and injustices in areas as far-ranging as education and child welfare, violence against women, and violation of treaty and nation-to-nation rights in the face of resource extraction on Indigenous lands. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission has confirmed for Canada that the path towards reconciliation is also unquestionably the path towards justice. In receiving the final calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and through resolution at General Council 42, the Church has committed itself to an agenda for reconciliation and justice.
These are the principles in the search for right relationships. Number 1, anti-racism and decolonization. We commit ourselves to confronting racism and acknowledging the role that churches and governments played in the colonization of Indigenous peoples. 2, a holistic approach. The legacy of residential schools includes not only physical and sexual abuse, but also the loss of language, culture, spirituality, identity, and community. 3, full participation of Indigenous peoples. Indigenous peoples must be active partners in decisions, conversations, and actions that affect their communities and futures. 4, whole community involvement. The impacts of residential schools extend beyond individual survivors to families, communities, and future generations. 5, healing and education. Reconciliation requires ongoing healing for Indigenous communities and continued learning and education for non-Indigenous peoples and institutions. 6, building right relationships. At the heart of this work is a commitment to walk together in respect, justice, truth, and reconciliation, seeking right relationships with one another. This is all summarized on the United Church website.
Let us pray. Creator God, whose spirit moves through the rivers, forests, and peoples of this land, today we pray not only with words, but with commitment to truth, healing, and right relationship. We remember the harms done through residential schools and the ongoing impacts of colonization. We grieve the children taken, the languages silenced, the cultures diminished, and the communities wounded. Give us courage to listen deeply to survivors, elders, and Indigenous communities. Move us beyond apology into action. Where there is ignorance, bring learning. Where there is separation, bring relationship. Where there is hurt, bring healing. Call us to support Indigenous-led renewal, to teach the truth, to honor the wisdom of First Peoples, and to walk together in justice and respect. When the work feels long, keep our hearts open, our hands ready. May we live in right relationship with one another, with this land, and with all creation. Amen.
My friends, I heard earlier in one person's comment that many traditions follow a light maker, and I've learned about the peacemaker of this territory, and I know about Jesus who walked with people to change the world. And so may the light of all of these peacemakers guide us in this day as we go from this place. And we recognize that the light of peacemakers, it never goes out. It only changes. And so you're invited to take this light with you. Watch closely. See? Here is this light for you to take in this day. May we each be peacemakers as we walk a path to justice. Amen. Now, before you head out, we do have some delicious treats that each church has prepared. And thank you, David and Daria, for bringing some tables in. The treats are going to be here in the center of the room, and there are 3 to sample. Wesley has made 3 sister soup, and St. Luke's has made bannock, and I'm told that they perfected their recipe through a few different attempts and trials to make it perfect for us today. And Cedar Hill, who has brought strawberry juice. So we're going to give the makers of food a moment to fill the table, but you're invited to stay as long as you wish to be in friendship and reconciliation. There's also coffee and tea here back in the corner. But just give a moment for our friends to bring things forward. So maybe just turn to your neighbor and pass the peace.